Here we go. This is Skip 101, brought to you by Fanduel, America's #1 sports book. I've never really been much into having personal heroes, though I did have an Ali poster up on my wall when I was in high school. But this man has always been a personal inspiration to me because of his fearlessness. I mean, this man has always dared to be rare, to just maximize his amazing array of talents. He pretty much invented gangster rap. Then he turned right around and reinvented himself as a movie star and a powerhouse screenwriter. And he went from straight out of Compton, straight to Hollywood, to Boys in the Hood, to the Friday franchise, to the Barbershop franchise, to Are We There Yet? And Ride Along and Fist Fight. And I could go on and on. And in his spare time, this man invented an entire basketball league. Big Three, Season 8, tips in June. Then this September and October, this man will embark on a 22-date North American tour. It's called Truth to Power, 4 Decades of Attitude. His name is O'Shea Jackson, but he is iconically known, as we all know, Ice Cube. And he joins me now to talk some sports and a whole lot of life. Welcome, sir.
Hey, appreciate that, man. Appreciate that.
Yeah, you got it. You deserve it.
Thank you.
So kick me off with this. So you're growing up in that Westmont section of South Central, and I know what a sports fan you were, but did you play any sports at all when you were a kid?
Big time.
Big time, such as?
Well, we had a lot of boys on our street.
Yeah.
So you can always get a football game. You can always get a baseball game, basketball game. You know, we was into everything under the sun. Dirt bikes, skateboards, go-karts. It was always something to do. And, you know, in the neighborhood, you got your gangbang streets.
Yeah.
And you got your sports streets. And we was a sports street. So it was a lot, you know, it was a lot of guys just showing what they can do in sports.
Okay, so it was Van Wyck Street, right? That was a sports street?
Yep.
And what did you excel in of those 3 big sports? What was your favorite, or what were you best at?
Football and basketball.
Okay.
Those were my 2 favorite. And you know, I could definitely hold my own, you know, within my age group, of course, on Van Wyck. And I played a little Pop Warner for Hawthorne, and a little organized basketball for the Inglewood YMCA.
Did you? Okay. Yeah. And what were you, the point guard, shooting guard? What was your forte?
Point guard, but I was a guard that can get rebounds too. So, you know, I definitely would love to go in there and bang. You know, I used to have to play with my brother. He's 9 years older than me, so you can imagine his friends and me, you know, me having to bang in there back in the 80s when everybody wanted to be Daryl Dawkins, Moses Malone. You know, I really learned how to you know, bang in there with the big boys and come up with a couple of boards here and there.
So did that go up through 9th grade? Like how far did you go, even in the YMCA league?
I think I stopped playing about 14.
Yeah.
You know, when I went to high school, I played football in high school for 1 year, and then you know, met Dr. Dre.
Yeah.
Fell in love with hip hop. And you know, the football field keeps you away from the studio, so I chose, you know, the studio life over the gridiron.
Okay. And you played that 1 year. Would that have been 9th or 10th grade in high school? 10th grade.
Football. I played fullback and I played outside linebacker.
Really?
Yeah.
And could you bang away as a fullback between the tackles?
Yeah, I
Yeah.
definitely could clear it out for my guy, for my tailback.
Yeah.
At a certain point, I was fast too. At a certain point, I started to do kickoff returns and punt
Did
returns.
you? Okay. And at that age, ninth grade, 10th grade, what size were you?
I was still little, I was still,
Yeah.
probably maybe 5'6",
Okay.
maybe 170 pounds, maybe.
Okay.
You know,
All right.
yeah.
And was that in your hood, or did, because at some point you started bussing out to Taft, right?
Yeah, I played at Taft.
You did.
I
Wow.
actually played at
God,
Taft for a year. Yeah.
man, the buses have to wait late, right, to take
Buses
you
have to
home.
wait late. After practice, just it's dark by the time you
I would
come
say.
home. So,
Yeah.
yeah, football practice, keep you late, especially on the games Friday nights. I remember, walking home with my equipment. It's almost 11 o'clock, eleven
Yeah.
thirty at night.
Yeah.
Um,
Absolutely.
Walking from the bus stop, beat up from the game, dirty with my equipment.
I never could get why they would bus you so far, because for anybody who knows Los Angeles, from where you are, it's not that far from like LAX, right? It's just kind of
Mhm.
in that area.
Yeah.
And to bus, I assume you just had to take the 405 back and forth because there's no other way to do it, and to go
Well,
completely up over the hill down into the valley to Woodland Hills to Taft High School. Man, it's far. That could take, I don't know, an hour and a half on a bad day, right?
yeah, I would have to get up. I would have to get to the bus stop by about 6:30.
Okay.
If you come to the bus stop later than 6:30, you was definitely gonna miss it, and that would get us to school. I get to school 7:30, 7:40. Bell ring at 8:10, and we in there. So it was a long ride. It was really long when you missed the bus
I'd
and you had
say.
to take the RTD.
Oh God.
If you had to take the regular
Yeah,
public transportation, it would take you 2.5 hours
I would think
for you
so.
to get to school. Yeah.
Yeah. And why was it? What caused this? That long busing?
Well, I went to school in the neighborhood elementary, and then one day I came home and my mother had talked to some of the other some of my friends' mothers on the block, and they had got a letter about busing, kids out of the neighborhood to, a different experience. And they
Huh.
got together and decided our fate that we was all gonna get bused instead of going to, my school would have been Henry Clay right
Yeah.
there on Western. So, we ended up, getting bused. Seventh grade. Seventh grade turned into the eighth grade. We end up, meeting friends out there, having a great time going to
Yeah.
school, and
No, it's great out there.
then we
Yeah.
wanted to be bused. We wanted to go out there after a while, um, because all of our friends and everything we had established was at those schools. So that's how it went
So
down.
tell me, how rough was your actual neighborhood, your Westmont area, because it had a reputation for being like the highest murder rate, I think, in LA County for a while. I don't know if that still stands, but that's what I always read about exactly where you grew up.
Yeah, it was very unpredictable.
Yeah.
Some days it'd be cool, calm, and collected. Some days it'd be, a lot of drama. I just think, you had to be able to hold your own. And it was a neighborhood that if you didn't show that you was tough,
Yeah.
you could really get devoured.
Okay.
Uh, had my share of fist fights growing up, establishing a pecking order, so to speak, in your
Yep.
neighborhood.
Yep.
And, you know, made decisions. It was all kind of people on our block, from working men, to men that wasn't doing the right thing, to sports guys, to guys that was chasing girls, guys that was slinging a little dope, and then guys that was gang banging. And you made a choice on which way you wanted to go. And
Yep.
so I was happy that in the 80s, it's a new music going around called hip hop
Yep.
that not everybody knew how to do or knew how to even be a part of it. Most people were just fans. And I was lucky that my neighbor was a guy named Sir Jinx, who is Dr. Dre's cousin.
Oh.
And so he was he had cardboard, he was doing head spins and break dancing and DJing and doing all that stuff, graffiti,
Yep.
everything in hip hop he would do. And I was intrigued when some of my other friends thought it was just a waste of time.
Hmm.
And I would go hang out, and I started to become a b-boy. I started to love it just as much, and I wanted to do it. I started rapping at 14.
Yep. And did you feel like you were instantly good at it, like gifted at it? Could you feel that?
I knew I was a good writer
Yeah.
at that time. I was young. The reason I had so much confidence as a writer is because my fifth grade teacher, a lady named Miss Prentice,
Huh.
she would tell us, write down what you did for summer vacation, this, that, and the other. And she was so impressed with what I wrote that she showed it to the principal.
Really?
Principal put it in a little newsletter, gave me a lot of confidence. And then when
Yeah.
I got to the sixth grade, they asked me to do a speech for the sixth grade class.
Huh.
And that was a real confidence booster because I wrote my speech and then was able to stand and deliver, and my class loved it. And
Hmm.
so that gave me the confidence that I could write.
Yeah.
But as far as rap, I wasn't that good. I needed a lot of practice and practice every day, just trying to get better and better.
How much of those long bus rides did you ride on the bus?
I wrote everywhere.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wrote everywhere on the bus, in class. You know what I mean? After practice, it was like to me, it was great to be able to be creative. Even in the middle of school or in the middle of a long ride, to still take time and be creative when other people was bored to death. They was going to sleep. They was doing all kind of other things.
Yeah.
And, it was either writing rhymes or doing homework, one or the other.
Just curious, that fifth grade teacher, black or white?
Black teacher,
Good.
short,
Good for
older
her.
teacher
Yeah.
named Miss Prentice. And she was very strict. But if you did what you were supposed to do, and if you showed that you was into the lessons, she was the sweetest lady in the world. So,
Exactly. Well,
uh,
God bless her because I
yes,
think she inspired you. It sounds like it.
without a doubt,
Yeah.
she inspired me in a lot of different ways. And that's why I still remember, you remember the teachers' names when they made an
You
impact.
do. Yeah. Okay. Where were your parents in all this? Were they encouraging at all?
Totally encouraging, anything that kept me off the streets, kept me out of juvenile hall.
Yeah.
Just they was always positive, and it wasn't just with music. It was, when I wanted to play sports, or when I wanted to, do other things other than just what the neighborhood had to offer.
Yeah.
They were always, behind me, and my siblings as well. I'm the youngest, so I had seen a lot of the mistakes they made growing
Yeah.
up, and was able to sidestep a lot of that.
And by the way, you had a half sister who got killed. What happened?
Yeah, sister named Beverly,
Hmm.
and she was killed by her husband.
Oh gosh.
Um, Her husband, they were staying. They had a nice apartment, and he had got robbed and actually kidnapped. So they kind of moved out that same day and went to go live with her mother.
Hmm.
And and they lived there for months, and he couldn't get back on his feet, and it started to wear on him.
Yep.
He wanted to be a police officer, and
God.
I think he failed the academy or
Yeah.
whatever, and so it just sent
Mm.
him into this deep depression. And then my sister didn't want him no more because he just turned into a different man.
Yeah.
So that started problems, and he didn't want to let her go.
Man.
So he murdered her when I was 12 years old.
How did it impact you? Did it shake you up?
Yeah, I was a
Yeah.
different person
Mm.
from that day on. Different kid. Life was not the same.
Mm.
It didn't seem as bright
Yeah, exactly.
to that, and so I knew life was serious, so I took things more serious probably than my peers who didn't have to deal with that.
So, was there any turning point moment when you could, that north south moment when you were tempted to do this or that? I don't know, gangbang or drugs or whatever it was. Do you remember any turning point moment where you went north instead of south?
Um, yeah, I mean it was more of a circumstance that I was getting myself into that didn't happen, and then in retrospect, I realized that was a blessing.
Hmm.
Um, Youngster that I knew that I went to school with, he started to really get high on dope, and he beat my mother out of some money
Hmm.
with a cockamamie story, about being my friend and this,
Yeah.
that, and I was so hot. I'm 17, 16 years old,
Yeah.
and my friend Greenfield had just back then you can buy shotguns from Big Five or Western Surplus,
Yeah.
one of those
Yeah.
surplus type stores.
Mm-hmm.
I just bought a Mossberg shotgun, and I was so mad. I was like, "Man, get it and let's go." And
Mm.
and we went over to the dude's house and knocked on the door. And if he would have came out, I think I'd have shot him.
Okay.
But he didn't come out. He wasn't there. And in retrospect, I was thinking like, my life could have been over. I'm
Yeah.
glad he
Good.
wasn't
Mm.
there. You talk tough, but ultimately I was glad he wasn't there.
Mm.
And, my life would have been different if he was, because I had my mind made up.
Did you ever see him again after that?
Seen him again. Never
Yeah.
seen him.
Okay. Well, God or somebody up there was good because
Yeah.
that would have changed things.
It would have totally, derailed my whole life.
Okay. So before we get to straight out of Compton, the other move that you made that always intrigued me the most was you sort of dabbled with NWA for a while, and you guys did this and that and this and that. Nothing really took off or caught hold, and you picked up and went to Phoenix and got an architectural design degree, right? You just picked up and went.
Yeah, it was more of a certificate, it was a
Okay.
1 year trade school.
All right, but you did that.
Yeah, you know.
That's guts, man. I mean that's having the perspective of, hey, I don't know if this is ever going to work. It's fun, but at some point you got to pay the bills.
Yeah.
And you went and did that. You went to Phoenix, Arizona, and did that.
Yeah, what we was doing, the music we were doing was so radical and
Yeah,
underground.
yeah,
I just never knew it was gonna ever see the light of day. Nobody did.
absolutely.
We thought this was just gonna be music that the very hardcore
I
listen
got it.
to,
Yeah,
and it wouldn't, go past that.
yeah,
And so I wanted to have something to fall back on. We was West Coast rappers, so it wasn't no sample size of
no,
West Coast rappers taking it all the way to the top.
yeah,
Our only example was Ice-T, and he was very known, and he was deep into East Coast hip hop culture.
yeah,
So he knew Big Daddy Kane. He knew KRS-One. He knew all the rappers
Yeah.
that we were fans of, and then he became, the biggest artist out of the West Coast when we were still trying to figure it out. So it was no way for me to know that NWA was gonna explode. So I wanted to fall back on. I went to Phoenix, Arizona for a year. Fall of '87 to fall of '88.
Okay.
And I'm glad I did, man. I met some incredible people. I don't think some of the songs that made it on Straight Outta Compton would have been there if I didn't go to school.
Really?
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
So you get your certificate. That's an accomplishment. I don't care if it's a year or 4 years. It's an accomplishment. And then you drive back to South Central. And then what took off? What inspired Straight Outta Compton then?
Well, by the time I get back, we've done a few singles. We've done, Eazy-E's career is rolling with Boys in the Hood.
Yeah.
He had another song called 8 Ball Rolling.
And by the way, you wrote Boys in the Hood for him, right? Okay.
Yeah, I wrote those songs.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then, I had the NWA song. So we had a few hits, local hits that were starting to bubble across the country. And so they was doing shows here and there, and finally, stumbled on a record deal with Priority. And so by the time I came back, it was time to work on the Eazy-E solo album, Easy Does It.
Okay.
So we just went straight to the studio and started working on that. And it seemed like as soon as we finished that record, we started on the NWA project and started working Straight Outta Compton.
Okay.
So I came back and it was starting to roll downhill for us when I got back.
Okay. So you wrote most of, if not all of that album, right? The Straight Outta Compton album?
I wrote a lot of it. I got to give credit to the DOC.
Okay.
I got to give credit to MC Ren.
Yes.
It was a collaborative effort on that end, but I wrote a lot of those songs for sure.
Well, and the title song, which you kick off, man, it's all time. Time. But hey, it is revolutionary, man. At that time, the lyrics, the message, it's way out there, but it found a huge audience because people were ready to hear that. And I think black and white people were ready to hear that, because I sure have a lot of white friends who just live by that album.
Well, at the end of the day, music had a lot of harnesses on it.
Yep.
And people knew that. People knew that the artists were, keeping it ultra clean for whatever reasons. They wanted more spins. They wanted to go pop. They wanted to be on TV. They wanted their songs to be in commercials. So, they harnessed a lot of things. You had some artists that was, like Rick James, who was starting to say, hey, man, I want to be myself up here.
Yeah, he did.
But still, he called it Mary Jane, where we called it, straight up weed or, or whatever. So we had, I think, taken off the shackles and taken off the chains and let artists be themselves wherever that is. It could be as extreme as an Eminem, or as tame as any other artist that didn't want to go that far. It was more boundaries. There was no more guardrails where you had to stop here because you were going too far. And I think when it comes to art, people like that. People like to know that art is not harnessed, that it's
that's right.
Pure expression in some way, shape, or form.
By the way, the very last line on Straight Outta Compton is, "Damn, that shit was dope," and It was. I don't even know who says the line. It just
That's
sort of
Dre.
pops. Who do you remember who recorded that line?
That's Dr. Dre.
That's Dr. Dre. I wasn't
Yes.
sure, and it just and it hit me. It connected with me because it was.
You
And
know what? Funny, Skip.
yeah.
That was a controversial line in the studio
Oh yeah.
because it was controversial because we knew the song was great and we knew the song was a banger and that it had a lot of
It's a
energy.
banger.
But I don't think nobody ever said, that they song was dope at the end of it. I think
No.
Carrots One has a line that says, fresh for 87, you suckers, so, that was about it as far as somebody
Yeah.
finishing the song and
I
telling
know.
you this shit was just dope,
That's it. Yeah.
Yeah.
No. It just listen. That track to me, I listened to it again last night because it's like emblazoned in my psyche. But it has such energy and momentum and power to it ultimately, and I can't even describe it. But it just explodes through the microphone, and you set that tone because you come hot out of the box, man. And
Yeah.
I think you inspired your mates on that one. Your bandmates. I think they followed the tone. Like, God, if he's going to do this, we got to go.
Yeah, I hope so. We were all in competition with each other.
Absolutely.
Friendly competition on,
Yeah.
Dre has set a tone of if you're not hot, if your lyrics are not hot, you're not making it on the record.
No.
And if you listen to Straight Outta Compton, there's records where I'm not there, or there's records where Easy's not there.
Yeah.
You just never, you had to come with it or he would pull you off the track like it was nothing. So
Yeah.
everybody, was,
Yeah.
maxed out when it came to
Maxed.
trying to be creative as you can and not taking one line for granted. And so you can feel that. And back then, we used to record off tape, 2-inch tape about this thick. And DJ Quick says something I think is profound, that back then, even the atmosphere in the room would get onto the tape.
Yeah. I got it.
Dealing with the magnetism of
Absolutely.
these frequencies. So even the vibe of the room
It's the vibe.
would make it onto the tape.
Right.
And that's what you're catching, the vibe of people just wanting to explode creative wise.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How did your parents react to that? What were they good with this, or what? Like, how old were you then? 18 or 19 on Straight Eyes? I guess you're right in that ballpark.
Yeah, I was like 18.
Yeah.
18. My mom's asked me, why did I have to come like that?
Yeah.
Why did I
understand.
use that kind of language? And I like, we rapping. We want to get our point across. And this is the way people talk. And so we don't want to be fake. And, she understood it more once the checks start coming in. And she saw this is a viable way to make a living. But, she's a mother. She don't want to hear her son. I'm pretty sure her church friends gave her a lot of grief, till she pulled up in that Mercedes Benz, and they probably,
well
stopped
said.
getting grief. But they was happy I wasn't on the streets, Skip.
Absolutely.
They was happy that I wasn't banging and going to jail, shooting people, on drugs, getting arrested. They was happy I was doing something other than those things, because it was just prevalent, in our neighborhood.
And by the way, your whole F the police message, you're way ahead of your time. Look at what has transpired since. So you're cutting edge, man. You're breaking through before a lot of people broke through. You're saying what needed to be said, and you're pioneering it, man. You're inventing this space.
I mean, we felt like our backs was against the wall, and we felt like, it was nothing we could legally do, nothing we was physically, gonna do. You know what I mean? Like,
Right.
unless you want to be killed. You know what I'm saying? So what we had was the music,
You did.
and we put our feelings on the music, and we was really surprised that a lot of people around the country or around the world, you know, have their problems with authority, and there's the same issues, so you know it reverberates, the feelings are something it seemed like the world been wanting to say but didn't really know how,
Yep.
and we created a song where you can release that frustration if you have it, without doing something physical.
Did you have personal issues with the police in your neighborhood at various points?
Yeah, we had issues. They would come sweat us.
Yep.
Been doing that, man. We was kids playing football on the street, on our bikes, making ramps, flipping on mattresses, water balloon fights. You know what I'm saying? It's no reason to sweat us, but they will still,
Yep.
come
I got it.
through and come with the intimidation stuff. And, when you really look back on it too, a guy who wanted to be a cop killed my sister, and I had a problem. I had a problem because of that.
Yeah, you
You know,
did.
that that's probably why a 17-year-old kid writes a song like that.
Okay.
Uh,
That's
it's a
deep.
mixture of a lot of different things.
Yeah. So before we leave this period of your life behind, you obviously were the driving force of a 30 for 30 straight out of LA about the Raiders. So
Mhm.
for those who don't remember, they were the Oakland Raiders, but they moved to Los Angeles in, I think it was 82. And you are at that point about 13 years old, maybe right in that ballpark. And what it intrigued me because I was looking at this. You always had the Rams, but the Rams didn't do it for you. And the Rams, when you were, I think, 10-ish, around 10, they actually went to the Super Bowl that was played out here at the Rose Bowl in Pasadena, but that didn't connect with you, I don't think, like the Raiders did.
I was going for the Steelers that game.
Oh, were you? Okay.
Yeah,
Why?
Steelers fan. I mean, I just, when you're young, you connect to who's winning.
Yeah.
You know, I started, I went, Dallas won in 77. I was a
Mm-hmm.
big Dallas fan.
Oh, were you? I didn't know that. Okay.
And
Good for
then,
you.
here come the Steelers, and I became a big Steeler fan.
Well,
And
they
then,
beat the Cowboys the next year.
yeah, and
Yeah.
then
Yeah.
and then the Raiders win in 1980, and I become a Raiders fan. So, when I'm 7, 8, 9 years old, you're just following the champs because you don't
Okay.
understand the game. But by 10 or 11, you're starting to understand the game. You're starting to really stick with a squad. And, it's your squad whether they win the Super Bowl or not. And
Yep.
so that's what happened with the Raiders in 1980 when they won in Philly. I mean, they won against Philly in New Orleans.
They did.
Shout out to Kenny King.
Whew.
Uh, so
He
he
had a
had a great
game.
game.
Yep.
Yeah, great
Mm-hmm.
game. And
Mm-hmm.
so they, that stuck. Like I was, when I was 11, I was still a Raider fan. Then and then they end up coming to LA,
Whoa.
and then this was my squad. Like,
Yeah.
wow, I'm a fan of all the players, from Cliff Branch, to Casper, uh, just everybody on the squad. I was a fan of Jack Tatum.
Yep.
Uh, so they become Raiders, and then they go on and win the Super Bowl like a year or two after being a Raider, LA Raiders. So that was it, man. That just put the nail in the coffin for me as a fan. and I've been rolling with them ever since. And they
Did you
need to win
get to
another
go to
Super
any
Bowl.
games at the Coliseum in that formative stage of yours, 13, 14, 15?
Not a lot, maybe one or two games. I went with my brother. That was the last place I wanted to put my little money was to buy a ticket. So,
Yeah,
um, but I was still a big fan. And as we started to get famous and make money, then I was able to buy season tickets. And right about the time I got comfortable with that, they ended up moving in
they
'94.
did. Yeah.
Yeah,
So your dad worked as like a groundskeeper at UCLA for a while, right? So
yeah.
did that catch you at all? Because that you experienced some of that wooden college basketball dynasty with Kareem and Walton, but I don't know if you were too young for it to get a hold of you.
Yeah. It was. I was a little too young for that era. Um, but I was actually remembering more of. I was more of a fan of SC.
Really?
Uh,
Okay.
I love
Oh,
Charles White, and I
yeah.
love Marcus Allen and Ronnie Lott, and just all the players they had. Um, and I liked a couple of the Bruins. But for the most part, I was a big
Yeah.
SC fan at the time. Even loved OJ back in the day.
Did you? Because
Yeah,
I sure
yeah,
did. I think a lot of people who remember listen, when he was at SC, he was, oh, he was the juice, man.
yeah. I was a little too young for his SC days, but seeing him with the Bills and
Yep.
knowing that he won the Heisman for SC, I was a big fan.
FanDuel is the best place to find all your favorite player props. And now you can make the smarter play with new performance trends. Want to see if a guy's hitting that over consistently, or maybe they've been flirting with a potential triple double? Get the latest stats right inside the app and see who's heating up. And once the game starts, man, that's when things get interesting. You can combine live prop bets into a same game parlay for a chance to win big. If you don't already have FanDuel, it's not too late to get in on the action. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. So just visit fanduel.com/skip to join today. Do it right now. Fanduel.com/skip right now. Make every moment more with FanDuel, official sports betting partner of the NBA. Okay, so you go solo, you have an issue with the finances with NWA. Do you ever look back and think what could have been if you'd stayed on with the fellas and made a lengthy career of it, or are you happy the way it turned out?
Man, I'm more than happy the way it turned out. Um, and I think after a while, we'd have probably made another record. It'd have been much different than their second record that they released. Um, I wasn't a big fan of that second
Yeah,
record.
I understand.
Title, the album cover, I had a problem with all that. I wouldn't have went for none of that. And so um, I think it would have been a point where I would have outgrown the group and wanted to do things my own way. And so eventually, I think, if it wasn't the second album or the third album, eventually I'd have went solo,
You would have.
just
Yeah.
do my own thing and kind of do it my way.
Okay. So I always read that Eazy-E is sort of credited as the godfather of gangster rap, and to me, you were, and God rest his soul. And I know you guys were competitive friends, like you were friendly competitive, but do you? How does it hit you when you hear that he was the godfather of gangster rap?
Um, I don't think it's him or me. I think it's Ice-T. I
Okay.
think Ice-T showed us how to do it. And Ice-T, um, when he put out 6 in the morning, it was like it was like a fresh glass of water.
Yeah.
It was exactly how we were feeling, and it was the type of hip hop we felt like we should be doing. And so, um, I wouldn't even put it on myself. I would give it to him because he was rapping, way before me. And, he's always, been stand up, straight up, a guy who's, I know when I need advice, I have no problem hitting up Ice
Okay.
because I know he's next level when it comes to intelligence. And so I'd rather give it to him.
Okay. All right. I appreciate that. And fittingly, you followed in his footsteps. He went more television, but you went to the movies.
Yeah.
And how did Boys in the Hood come about with John Singleton, and how how harsh a transition was that for you? Did it come easily, naturally, or did you really have to work at that?
Um, well, I was discovered really by John.
Yeah.
And I wasn't thinking about acting whatsoever. He approached me and he said that would be perfect for what he was doing.
Mm-hmm.
And that was 2 years before he even graduated from college.
Yeah.
I didn't really know to
Yeah.
take
Right.
it serious. You know what I mean? I was like, all right, dude,
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm not an actor, so I felt like I was totally unqualified anyway. So by the time the movie really came along and it was real, um, I had knew him for 2 years, learned to understand him and respect his passion
Yeah.
to be a filmmaker at the highest level. And so when it was time to do the part, I had so much help. I had, you know, uh, a team, from Lawrence Fishburne to Cuba Gooding Jr. I mean, all these actors were helping me in some way, shape, or form. Just get it right and get comfortable with the process, because acting is it's the process that you really have to get comfortable with to know what you need to do to come off on screen. So I was grateful to be able to work with Morris Chestnut.
Yeah.
They were young. They were young. Neil Long. They were young, but they had way more experience in acting than I did, and they was able to help me through the process.
Yet every time you're on screen, you're great on screen because you you project on screen. You take the screen over, which is just like a gift. But you're so sincerely real in your portrayals that it's almost like it's not a character. It's almost like it's you, like you, Doughboy. I mean, you. That's you. That's I don't know. It's like you reach down for a part of you, and after a while, I'm not even sure you're acting. You're just being real. Does that make sense to you? Does that?
Yeah, I mean, I've never went to any formal acting
No.
classes, and I think that's helped me in some ways. To I gotta be real. I gotta Skip. If I feel like I won't be great at it, I won't even take the part because um, I have to encompass it and feel it and be honest as I can. So in some ways, it does seem like I guess I'm picking roles that's right in my wheelhouse, and I haven't really stepped out of that because I respect the art so much that I only want to do things that I know I'm gonna be great at, And anything outside of that, I'd rather for them to grab another actor who will be amazing at it. So
Okay.
I just kind of stay in my lane and do what I do best, and hopefully that's good enough for the people.
So you've turned down some roles where you just said that ain't me. Like I, I can't do that. I don't even want to try to do that. Right?
Yes,
Okay.
yeah. I think when you're talking about acting, you want to get the best person for the character. You got a character to figure out who's gonna fulfill that. So you want to get the best person. You don't want to just be stuck with a name or I just want this guy, I want this guy, and then a better actor comes in. Man, you owe it to the audience to give the better actor the part. Not saying that there's actors that's better, but there's actors more fitting for certain roles that I
Sure.
think they should have the part over myself, if you can dig it.
I can, but I think it was John Singleton who encouraged you that if you can write rap, you can write scripts, right? And
Yeah.
here comes Friday, which is hallowed, and you created that all yourself, right? You sat down and said, "I can do this." I mean, you'd already done, you'd written several scripts before that, but that was your wheelhouse script, right?
Yeah, dealing with, me and DJ Pooh, who is a unsung West Coast legend. Um, we've created some great stuff together.
You have.
And so, we hanging out. We love In Living Color. We love Hollywood Shuffle.
Yep.
Um, and then we see that the only movies that they're making about our neighborhood is pretty hardcore. Boys in the Hood, Menace to Society, South Central. And, we're like, yo, we had a little more fun with all this.
Yep.
Let's let's do a movie about how we looked at the neighborhood from our perspective. And that's how we started that project. And it was my third script and my first script to ever get made. And I'm so proud of the movie because the movie makes my favorite comedians laugh. So you got people coming up
Yep.
that made you laugh, and then they telling you that something you wrote or did
Yeah.
makes them laugh.
Right.
That's really the cream of the crop right
Any
there.
instances of that specifics? Anybody you could say
Bill
who
Murray. Bill Murray. Yeah,
really?
yeah. I seen him backstage at one of these little events, and he was like, "Friday, you."
Friday.
Oh
Yeah.
man, I love that movie, man. I can't
Good.
tell you how much I
Yeah.
love it, man. Cracks me up. So when you can make Bill Murray laugh,
I'd say.
it's kind of like, that's not bad. Not bad for, yeah, I'm not a comedian, but, if I can make somebody laugh,
Absolutely.
that's pretty cool.
Well, it's like life circumstances that are just funny that you lived and you brought them to life in your script. And then how close are you to Craig? How is that you? I mean, are you playing yourself basically?
Um, in some ways, Craig could do things that I wouldn't do, and then
Yeah.
some ways he does things that I would. Um, I felt like, Craig is a lot of different people who live in the neighborhood who seems like the one with the sanity. You know,
Yeah. In the
you
end.
know,
Yeah.
he's the one that has his senses about him, and then everything around him is going crazy.
Yeah.
I think I think everybody feels like that, no matter who they are. Sometimes you feel like, man, am I the only one with some sense around here? Because everybody else is crazy.
Mm,
So that's kind of Craig's temperament. But
it
sometimes
is.
I'm the crazy one. I'm not always the centerpiece.
So in your view, of yourself, when you look in the mirror, is there any difference between O'Shea and Ice Cube? Is there any, is Ice Cube a character, or is he just 1,000% real you?
I think he's a piece of who I am. He's a slice of me.
Yeah.
Not not the full person. I think I'm, more rounded than Ice Cube. Ice Cube is just um, a section of who
Yeah.
I am.
Okay. I like that. And I get that.
Yeah.
Okay. So Ice Cube has a son named O'Shea Jr., who's following in footsteps. And I don't know if that horrified you to begin with, but he's doing it. He's making a name. Den of Thieves, and then he just took over Den of Thieves 2. That was his movie. And
Mm.
I I think of you when I watch LeBron and Bronny and what they're going through and how difficult it can be to watch your son play basketball or watch your son up on the silver screen. What has it been like with your son? Are you? I know you're extremely proud of him, but are you okay with him following in these footsteps? Because they're big footsteps.
Oh, definitely okay with him following in my footsteps. Um, but he's creating his own path.
He
He's not
is. Yep.
trying to be a duplicate of who I am. And, he's more than qualified. He did the work. I got him into the business. Um, you know, O'Shea Jr. is second generation Hollywood, so he's been on sets
Yep.
around the industry his whole life. I don't think he remembered. I mean, there was no life of him, and we're not on a movie set here and there. So he he was kind of made for this, and then for him to take it serious when I presented Straight Outta Compton, the movie, to him. He worked 2 years to get himself ready, and showed me that he was ready for this moment, and so um, he's more than qualified and
Yeah.
more. He's definitely prepared, so I feel good about it. I don't feel like I know this industry could be tough, and they could be harsh. You won't see me taking up for him. He has to do that for himself when it comes to critics and
Yep.
the industry, but he's more than qualified, and I'm happy to see him living out his dreams.
Okay. So, from your perspective, what do you see with Bron and Bronny? How do you see that playing out? And do you identify a little bit because you do have a son following in your footsteps?
Yeah, I think as a father, there's nothing wrong with LeBron doing everything he can to get his son to the league. And then from there, it's up to his son
It is. Yep.
to become the player that, the best player he can be at that level. And so, daddy can't play for you. You got to be able to do it yourself. And, either he's going to step up to that or not. But I don't think it's a problem with LeBron getting him there. And now it's up to his son to go from there. Now, if LeBron put him there and he knew his son wasn't ready or wasn't going to ever be ready, then that's a problem.
Yeah.
But if he believes, my son is a pro player, he can do it, um, then why not?
Have you seen enough of Bronny to draw any conclusions about what you think his future holds?
Um, well, I've seen him get better, and that's important. That's the start of it. He has to become a better player at the end of the year than he is at the beginning of the year, and that's what I saw happen. And even though it was like on mostly the G League level, but you got to start somewhere. And so by him, really getting buckets in that G League and then coming up and starting to get comfortable in the NBA. We'll see how he does next year. And as long as he continues to progress, there's nothing wrong with him being out there to me.
I got you. So you are a big Laker fan. I mean, you grew up like within walking distance, it seemed like, of the fabulous Forum. So you went through Showtime era. What was it like to you when your team acquired Luka? What were your emotions right off the bat?
Surprised. Um, Shaking my head that the Lakers once again did it again. This is an organization that, as long as I've known about it, has been able to grab the big names. From
Yep,
Will Kareem to Bob McAdoo to
they did.
Shaq, Kobe, Pau Gasol, even Anthony Davis. Getting that name, LeBron, and now Luka. So it's I just shook my head that they pulled it off once again. Yeah.
And did you have you missed Anthony Davis at all? Did you miss him in the postseason at all?
Yeah, I think we did. You know, I've never had a problem with his game. Of course, it's the injuries. You just never know when he's going to be available,
Yeah.
and I think that started to wear on the Lakers organization. Um, so when he's on the floor, he's, to me, top 10 player in the league without a doubt, and so I think he's not in LA just because he couldn't stay on the floor. Um, so we'll see. I still think we need more pieces. Luka is a great player, but I think we need still some size. We got beat up on the
You
boards
did.
there, and we need that size.
How did you think Luka and LeBron clicked?
Pretty good. I don't think I saw any issues when they were both on the court. They both play kind of similar games. Very under control. Um, and I think Luka was getting comfortable in LA. Um, they didn't have a lot of games to gel, so I didn't figure they were going to go far in the playoffs against teams that's been together for years.
Yeah.
So I'm not surprised that they didn't get out the first round, but they have to add pieces, and I expect better next year.
So the Mavericks turn around and land Cooper Flag with the first pick. I assume they're going to take Cooper Flag.
Yeah.
What could you see from AD if Kyrie can come back from his ACL and Cooper Flag? Do you think that's going to be a force to be reckoned with next year?
I think so. I had a chance to watch Cooper play out in Springfield a year ago at the Basketball Hall of Fame. They had a tournament for the high school players. And
Oh yeah.
just to see him, out there moving and, um, I just think Dallas, got a good squad, with Kyrie, Cooper, and AD. I think it's a nice nucleus. Now, how much they stay on the court together, that's the only
That will be it.
thing you have to worry about. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, back to your Raiders. Do you still, is your heart still with the Raiders? Are they still your squad?
Definitely. I'm president of
Okay.
the Raider Nation. I can't go nowhere.
Okay. All right. So this was just me personally. I believe in Shedeur Sanders, maybe because I believe in Dion, but I did believe in Shedeur, and it upset me that your team had 7 chances to draft him and didn't draft him. Did it
Yeah.
did it hit you at all? Did it bother you at all? They had what, 3 third-round picks and 2 fourths, and at
Yeah.
least somewhere in there you could have taken him, but that's just me.
It did bother me. I wanted him, but I understand, you know, I could see from a coach's point of view why not to take him, because you take him, you don't have a good season or two, Deion's getting your job.
He's getting your
You know what I
job.
mean? It's like,
There's no
so
doubt. Yep.
you
No.
be drafting your replacement. And I think a lot of owners, I mean, not owners, but a lot of coaches was like, nah, I don't want to draft my
Yeah.
replacement. So I think that might have been the biggest reason why he slipped. It wasn't because of how he plays on the field. It
No.
was probably because, they were scared to lose their job to Deion Sanders.
I do agree. And then Deion made some remarks. He was on my show, and he talked about sort of maneuvering at the top of the draft because he thought his son was potentially going to go first overall to Tennessee, and he was going to make teams aware that, no, he's not for you or you. I want him to go here. And I think the league said, okay, watch this. How about going to Cleveland in the 5th round? And that's where it ended up. And I just thought it was shameful, but that's just me.
Yeah, he's definitely not a 5th round pick. So, he should have went earlier. But hey, maybe just put some motivation on him.
It does. Yeah. If he gets a shot, he's got to get a chance. I think they got 5 quarterbacks now in Cleveland.
Yeah. They got
okay.
So hopefully he get a chance and do what he do.
So you got a new quarterback in Geno Smith, who's always been pretty good, and I know Pete Carroll believes in him because you got a new coach in Pete Carroll. What's your gut tell you about next year for your Raiders?
We'll see. Like, I believe in Pete Carroll. I believe in Geno. I think, Geno started off with the Jets, was it, right? Was it Jets?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It didn't go well. Yeah.
Go well. Then he went to Seattle and had a chip on his shoulder.
He did.
And he did a good job, for them, and he definitely improved his level of play.
Yeah.
So now hopefully he brings that same chip to to Vegas.
Yep.
And has something to prove, and even takes his level of play to another level and get into the playoffs and make some noise. That's the hope.
That's the hope. Back to basketball for a moment. You did create an entire basketball league called the Big Three. Was it your brainchild originally, or was that a co-decision, a co-creation?
More of a co-creation, after when I say we, my guy Jeff Quantnance, who I've been working for like 28 years. After we, brainstormed for a year, and we wasn't even thinking about this as a serious idea. We were spitballing. 3-on-3, why hasn't it been professionalized? What's going on? Really taking a look at it, and then saying, what would a league look like if it was a pro league? How would it be different? How would it be better? How would it, is there a void in the industry? Do people want it? And all those questions we spent a year asking ourselves and arguing about rules, and then we looked up and said, damn, man, this is a damn good idea that can actually work. And more people play 3-on-3 than 5-on-5 worldwide.
Fact. Yep.
So, hey, like, what's stopping us but us? Like, and so after a year, we decided, man, if we can get, once Dr. J said it's a good idea, and George Gervin and Clark Drexler and Chauncey Billups and
they did
O'Neal, and once all these Hall of Famers start to say that this is a good idea, we know we got a good idea. And it was just all about us saying, hey, do we have the fortitude to because it's a long shot to get this over the hump. And luckily we did.
You feel like you're over the hump. You feel like it is now a resounding success.
I feel like we are at the mountaintop and we're looking over and we're ready to roll the rock downhill and pick
Really?
up steam and momentum.
Good for
Yeah.
you.
Yeah.
Congrats, man. That is a big achievement because it's against long odds.
Yes. Moving to the city models,
Yep.
taking on owners of teams is our it's our a path to the future. It's our path to success. Growing the league, we pared down from 12 teams to 8 to be able to really lock into these cities. And then we expect to expand, sell more teams, and continue to grow.
Good for you. All right. I can't let you go without asking you because my wife will kill me because this is her favorite show, but it's called The Studio. It's a new series.
Yeah.
And out of the blue, I like it also, and it's really it's well done. It's well written, and out of nowhere, there's an episode called Casting, and you take it over, and we just fell out of our chairs. Cube, and you're the Kool-Aid man, and I recommend for people go watch this because it's crazy funny because it's really about naive white people in the studios, maybe stupid white people who aren't sure about racial sensitivity or insensitivity when it comes to casting. And they want to cast you in a big movie as the Kool-Aid man. So when Seth Rogen brings you this idea, what was your first reaction?
It was funny. It was funny that the show was about, whether having me as the Kool-Aid man
was
with
yeah.
a white family is racist or having me as the Kool-Aid
It,
man with a black family is racist. So the fact that,
correct.
this is
Yeah.
probably stuff that studios go through all the time behind closed doors.
All the time.
Is this looking right? Does this feel right? And
Yeah.
they actually drive themselves pretty crazy with it. And I just thought it was smart. It was nuanced.
It was.
And it was a great way to show um, how some of our anxieties can get in the way, when it's really about entertaining the people. It's about making a movie about the Kool-Aid man. Like, why are we so knee deep into race on this? So it just was a funny episode. Seth is a funny dude that
He is.
I've worked with him in the past here and there. My son has worked with him. And
Yep.
whenever he called, man, it's hard for me to say no.
So as you look back on your transition in your career from straight out of Compton into to Are We There Yet? Do you look back and wonder how you sort of made the transition into a very bankable star for white America? Because I know a lot of white people love you and love you in movies like Are We There Yet? Because we can all relate to that. So do you look back at that transition and think, how did I do that? How did I pull that off?
I definitely, kind of dissected and figure out, where was these turning points.
Yeah.
But I just think, I think being authentic, at every turn is the key. If I'm feeling it, you'll know it. If I don't feel it, you'll know it. And I just think people uh, respect that.
They
At the end
do.
of the day, it's like there's no hidden agendas, and I think people will respond to you when they know you're gonna be real. They might not like what I say, might not like what I do, but at the end of the day, they know that it's coming from a real place, and if they wait long enough, I'll do something that you do like. It's just
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
just kick back, and you might not dig this thing, but the next thing you may love it. So I just feel extremely blessed to be in a position where I can, give people music, give people movies, and now sports, and they enjoy it and be able to, have fun with it
Yep.
and get a smile out of them. Hopefully.
And now, for the first time in a decade, you are going to tour, and it's 22 almost bang dates where you're just going night after night.
Yeah.
Every big arena in the country you're playing, and truth is power. Explain that. It's 4 decades of attitude, because that's what you are. You are attitude. What is this show? What will it mean to you and to your fans?
Well, truth to power. I think I've spent my career, spitting truth to power, speaking truth to power.
You have.
So, I think it's a great way to title the tour. And when we're talking about 40 years, I wrote my first hit song in 1985. I was 16 years old. Boys in the Hood for Eazy-E.
Yep.
In the 11th grade. And so to be able to go from 85 to 2025 and have, a lot of great music in between, it's only right for me to do a big production and to, give the fans who've been down from day one an amazing, bookmark of a show, that really kind of highlights not only the music, but my influence through these 40 years. So I'm looking forward to it.
Will you do some monologues where you will rant, or you'll spit some opinions?
Well, I think, when you go to a concert, you got to be careful with that stuff. We want to rock the house and have people
definitely.
Have fun. And I think what we're going to have is, vignettes and presentations on.
That's cool. Yeah.
On things, and how did the events of the day affect the music, and just really give people kind of a 30,000 foot view of my career.
That's beautiful.
And why I do what I do.
Hey, they say rap's a young man's game, but you can still bring it, and I'm sure we're going to get a lot brought on this tour.
Yeah, it's not like sports, so I don't got to worry about blowing out knees and Achilles. As long as my tongue is working,
it works. Yeah,
I should be fine when it comes to that.
So go buy tickets. Go see this man when he comes to the big arena near you in September and October. You can check out, icecube.com right now and buy tickets to it. Hey, I love you, man. I appreciate your heart and your candor and you spending a little time with me here today. And I'll be watching Big 3 and tour.
Anytime, every time. And hopefully we get a chance to talk more Big 3 this summer.
You got it. All right. I appreciate you, man.
Take it easy. Much love, much respect.
Thank you. That's Ice Cube. And that is it for this week's Skip 1-on-1. I'll see you next week.